Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Finding Joy in Your Vestibular Journey.
I'm Joy.
I'm Marissa.
Come join us on this journey as we navigate life with a vestibular disorder.
We want to bring hope and awareness to others by sharing personal experiences, hearing from medical professionals, and other vestibular warriors.
Are you ready to dive into this journey with us?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for another episode. We are so excited because we have Kimberly Warner joining us from Unfixed Media. Very
Welcome.
excited. Thank you, Kimberly.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, you guys.
Thank you.
Tell us, for those who don't know, you also have a vestibular disorder. Would you tell us kind of your journey that you've been on with your vestibular disorder?
Yeah, and I'll try. Just cut me off if it's
Okay.
long. It's a long
You are
one.
fine.
It started 8 years ago, 2015. And it's very convoluted. I didn't even get a diagnosis an official diagnosis until I met Dr. Bay 2 years ago. So mine was very long and very convoluted. 2015, I started, two things were happening. One, I was coming off of a really bad bicycle accident where I had fractured my pelvis, had cracked my bicycle helmet. I was doored, they call it. So a person opened their door in front of the bike lane and I flew over the door and I was on bed rest for 2 months. And, during that period, I was healing. I felt fine. But I wasn't dizzy or anything. I'd never experienced dizziness before. But right around that same time, my brother and I had taken a DNA test, and I found out that the father that raised me, my beloved dad, that was everything and everything that I wanted to be in my life, he died when I was in high school. And I found out that he wasn't my father through this DNA test. And so there were these, I always say, it's like I had a fracture in my foundation, literally, like in my pelvis. And then I had this fracture in my identity that came as a complete shock. So I had both of this sort of two very destabilizing things happening at the same time. I think I also already had a predisposition from childhood as being from trauma and stuff. I dealt with trauma by freezing. I didn't do the fight or flight. I just froze. And so I think this destabilization just triggered some really deep stuff in me around how to deal with shock and trauma. I was a perfectionist, definitely OCD tendencies, all of that. So, suddenly I couldn't control my world. And I wasn't dizzy at that time while I was on bed rest or when I found out the DNA test. But as 2 months later, as I started walking again and starting getting back into some of my work life, I was driving to work one morning and I was on a highway. So I was going like 70 miles an hour. And all of a sudden the car did this huge flip. And I had like literally in my head, not literally in real life.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had a history of weird blacking out things where I'd like be on an airplane and I'd black out, or I'd be sitting down and I'd black out, weird things. And so in my head, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to black out. And so I pulled the car over and my heart was racing, of course. And I'm like, what is going on? The car I wasn't feeling the spin anymore, but it was so sudden and so dramatic that it was really hard for my body to reset that day. And I already had this news of the DNA test spinning in my head. And so it's sort of up to the ante on the destabilization that I was already feeling. But then it passed. I worked. I remember just feeling a little off. And I think it was 3 weeks later, I was on a different job in Wisconsin, of all places. And I was And I had wrapped that job and was just sitting down at a restaurant in Milwaukee having a dinner and like not even drinking or anything. And as I got the plate, I remember the same thing happened. And I felt like the stool underneath me just did this complete 360. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to pass out again. So I went to the bathroom. I sat on the floor, put my head between my knees. Anyway, I had 2 of those episodes. And then after that, I started feeling dizzy for like the second half of the day periodically. And I would notice sometimes when I was walking down the sidewalk that the sidewalk would drop out underneath my feet. But it'd kind of reset when I'd sleep and I'd wake up and feel better. But then May 5th of 2015, I remember waking up and it was there 24/7 after that. It never left. And I had already started pursuing with a naturopath, like what is wrong with me? But people were they were thinking it was like some weird post-concussion thing. Even though it was way after the bicycle accident, we're talking months and months and months. But that was sort of all the naturopath could think. I also started developing a lot of outer ear infections in my left ear. So I definitely think there was trauma in the bicycle accident that happened here. And I think there was some muscle tension and all of that, but they were misleading the real diagnosis. People were going either concussion or they were saying, something's happening with the ear. None of that was happening. None of that was true. Potentially there was some, anyway, so I ended up finally getting to a neurologist. He was like the dizzy specialist in Portland, and it took 4 months to get in. But at that point, 24/7 dizzy, not leaving the house unless my husband's hand was like locked into mine, really scared a lot. I don't think of myself as a fearful person. I was really confident, jumped into things, always said yes. Was sort of like just throw me in and I'll learn how to swim. That type of person. And suddenly, like, I was afraid to be home alone. I even remember packing a backpack with water and a sandwich because I knew my husband was going to be gone all day. And I was just afraid that I was going to fall over in the house and hit my head and, no one would be there to save me. So I walked 10 blocks to the emergency room and just sat out front all day in at the emergency room. I didn't have like an appointment or something, but I thought I'll be safe if I'm here. And I have my sandwich and I have my water. Yes. I was just so scared.
It's kind of like we go into survival mode, right? I did that too with when my husband would go, my tray in front of me, I put like tons of waters, and I had a little purse that I would carry around the house with me with my water, my phone, crackers, because I was afraid too that I wouldn't be able to get up and get what I needed. So it's like we go into that survival mode.
Yes, absolutely. And what's weird though too is you'd think that our nervous system, when we most need to reset and sleep, it doesn't. At least my body, I end up getting insomnia. I end up having a hard time eating. It's like, or what I am eating just makes me hungrier even more. I had the most insane thing next to my bed, like dehydrated bananas for potassium, a jar of peanut butter with a spoon in it, bottles of water just to get through the night. So if I turned over and I, felt dizzy and it made me triggered, I would like grab a spoonful of almond butter or peanut butter and then try to go back to sleep. But for the most part, I didn't sleep for oh my God. I'm not exaggerating. I didn't have a good night's sleep for 2 years. I had such horrible insomnia. And I tell people that in hindsight, because I was also very stubborn. I did make it to the neurologist, and the first thing he prescribed was diazepam. He said he thinks that I had cervicogenic vertigo. So he said I would take 12 sessions of PT with a neck PT and I would be better. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that first. and then I'll, try this drug trial thing. There were some other anti-seizure meds that he wanted to try, all kinds of other whatever. I did the PT, nothing helped. It kept getting worse and worse. The PT actually said, I feel like you might have this thing called Mal De Debarquement. But she said you weren't on a boat, so I don't think you do. But I remember it sticking in my head, going, and I wasn't able to look at screens at that time.
Yeah.
I wasn't, fortunately, maybe because I wasn't doom scrolling. I couldn't. I literally, it like sent me in crazy panic attacks just to look at my phone.
Yes.
So weird. So, unnerving. But what I was saying is I do think that the drug intervention probably would have been what I needed to give my brain a break, because I was having literally like 24/7 panic attacks and I couldn't get out of the loop and I wasn't sleeping. And so if somebody had just sedated me, literally, and I say that laughing, but now I do think that I do think I needed some sort of pharmaceutical intervention to get my brain out of that looping pattern. And I was so stubborn that I didn't do the drugs. So, I took the diazepam, and the next morning I just felt like I was really dizzy, but I had an elephant on my chest. I was just laying in bed and I'm like, this is miserable, because now I just feel like I'm pinned to the bed and feeling the dizziness. So I just stopped that, continued with the PT, didn't get any better. And at that point, my relationship with my husband was really rocky. He has an adult daughter with intellectual disability, and he was going through a major crisis with her and his ex-wife at the time. And suddenly he had to care for her and me. And he was in crisis panic mode as well. So we were a mess, like full on. And I ended up buying a one-way ticket to Colorado and moved in with my mom as a 40-year-old woman. I don't know what happened to my life. I was hopeful, but I still didn't have a diagnosis. So I was hopeful that in like the cool Boulder community of Colorado, there would be some healers. I was there for 7 months, spent way too much money on so many different kinds of doctors, and went home 7 months later with the exact same symptoms. And I'm in Portland, Oregon, which is where VeDA is. Nobody told me that VeDA existed.
Yes, I remember you saying that. Yes.
Yeah. I don't even know what the neurologist never told me this. This dizzy specialist never told me this, that VeDA was here. He made me feel like I was an anomaly. Yes. So that, that takes me up to, I think that was summer of 2016 is when and I had this idea of like, let's just go to the Oregon coast in a little town where there's 700 people and rain and fog and nothing. I just felt like maybe that is going to heal something in me. And so we ended up selling our house and moving to this tiny little sleepy village. And I found a new doctor. I begged her to let me into her practice because her practice was closed. And she's the first person that started to turn things around for me. And it wasn't a vestibular approach because she didn't really have much knowledge about vestibular, but I have an autoimmune disease. And when I was 21, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease, which is a hyperthyroidism. And what I didn't know, and I was managing that. I didn't get radiation on my thyroid, all that, but I was sort of managing it. What I didn't know during this stressful period was that I flipped and my thyroid levels were really, really low. And even though my symptoms were more like like insomnia and losing weight and all of that, I was really low. She tested it, put me on some low thyroid hormone. And for the first time I was still dizzy, but I felt like I could handle it a little bit better. And so that was, I mean, it took a year and a half to get up to the thyroid level that she wanted me to be at. But I slowly could feel my system, the resilience in my system that could handle the vestibular stuff. So we didn't even touch that.
Yeah.
Like, let's just work with the foundation.
Right.
So yeah, so that kind of was the beginning of where I started to build myself out of the hole that I had fallen in. Yes, but that, like I said, she didn't have any vestibular training. That's when with the resilience, I was able to kind of get into the Google searches a little bit more, the screens a little bit more. And that's when I started connecting with people online and going, I definitely think what I have is Mal De Debarquement. And the main thing was just every time I was in a car, it was gone. Like if I had been on a road trip even though it started in the car, cars were my best friend.
Yeah.
And I felt like everything that I read, and that I know there's discrepancies between maybe PPPD and Mal De Debarquement are exactly the same. I don't know. But when I finally learned about Dr. Bay and I got to him, he distinguished it for me and said that I have Mal De Debarquement and vestibular migraine. So, that to me was such a relief, as you both know.
Yes.
I mean,
What year did you find Dr. Bay?
this was during the pandemic, thanks to the pandemic,
Wow.
because I wasn't going to fly to Texas and spend $800 on an initial consultation. My insurance wouldn't pay for all of that. So it was I want to say it was 2020, late 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. And it might have even been early 2021, but it was somewhere. I know it was the pandemic because he started doing the virtual visits. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So nobody had ever mentioned anything like this about, vestibular disorders or peripheral disorders or central disorder. And I just had to find all that information online. And the first group that I found was through the MDDS Foundation. And it was such a Debbie Downer, I hate my life. Nothing works. Your life, just quality of life is destroyed. It was just a horrible place that I eventually left. So I know I wasn't alone, but I was like, oh my God, these are my people. And it seemed like most of them were like in their 70s or 80s too. Yeah. I think I'm glad that there's a foundation for MDDS, but I feel like they could do a much better job at connecting with their people and diversifying how their message is out there, because it feels like it's very limiting. It didn't serve me at all. What served me was finally finding VeDA.
Yes. So is that then when you did find VeDA, kind of after Dr. Bay, or?
No, actually VeDA, I found VeDA before. And this is the part where I can't remember exactly how it happened, but actually my first connection with Cynthia, somebody had found my Life Raft book. And Cynthia is a huge cat lover. And the Life Raft book is essentially one of the things the only thing that I did for those 2.5, 3 years where I was barely leaving the house. I can show you, I found this technique called needle felting. Here's one of so it's wool. And I literally would just sit with a needle and wool and craft these cats. And I did this cat specifically because I felt like they were so vulnerable, and it mirrored the vulnerability that I was feeling, like no fur, no protection from the world, just and I needed a sense of purpose, and it became something about the softness of the wool and the blocking out the periphery of my world and sitting at a table for literally like 8 hours a day, just poking a needle in wool, was my therapy. And I didn't know that I loved doing this until I needed to do it. And I became obsessed. I think some of the OCD served me because it was like all I wanted to do, all I could do. And so I created a whole series about each one of those takes like 3 months to make. And I created 13 of them in total. And they, in hindsight, I looked back at them and kind of was like, oh, these mirror my process of living with this disorder, from, the cat that's really upset and his tongue is hanging out and he's barfing, or looks like he's throwing up a cat ball or a fur ball, to the one that I just showed you of sort of this loving embrace between the mother and the child, where I was learning to kind of care for myself again and be okay with feeling like a mess, and being kind to myself for being such a mess. So there was some insight that came from those. And anyway, Cynthia found them and wanted to do a VeDA article on that process and my story. So that's how we connected. I don't even think she knew that I was doing film. I wasn't doing film at that time, but I had a previous career in film. So we connected over cats.
That's amazing. I did not know that. That is very interesting.
I think that's amazing that you were able to do those, to sit and do that. I mean, I feel like I did nothing during my time except journal maybe, but
yeah, that would have been the alternative for me. I was very lucky that I had found it. It was my lifeline. I mean, that's why I called the book Life Raft, because it saved my life. It gave me a sense of purpose, but even more than that, it just dulled the noise, all the sensorial noise that was just incessant. The dizziness and the sounds and the lights, it was so abrasive. I always describe it as like a cat whose fur is standing on end. I just felt like that all the time. So having a ball of warm wool in my hand and just really having one task to do all day long. I can't now. It's funny now that I'm like so much stronger and a lot better. I can't do it. Like I can't sit there for so long. It's, I have so many other things that I want to do, but when you have nothing, it was everything to me.
How was that managing your symptoms? Once you had them somewhat under control, did you go back to work right away? Kind of take us through that process of when you kind of got back into film, and how was that managing your symptoms?
Yeah. Well, so this screen became a little bit better and I had it dimmed way down. But something about edits on the way that, getting into the Premiere software, which is what editors use to cut films and stuff, the movement of that was still really hard on me. I tried some different glasses, but I just didn't have a lot of success early on. So I ended up, what I ended up doing was creating Unfixed, and that was mostly out of a desire to learn from other people on how to do this. I didn't think I was going to be spending much time doing in front of the screen. I thought this was 2019. I thought I was going to, so this was pre-managing my symptoms, I guess. I'm looping back a little bit.
Yeah.
End of 2019, right before the pandemic, I started Unfixed because I was like, I need to find other people that are living this way. And I didn't have a diagnosis yet. So I wasn't focusing on vestibular patients. I was like, anybody with chronic illness.
Yeah. Okay.
How
Yeah.
are you living? So that's how it ended, you know, people with MS and ALS and terminal cancer. And, but what the plan was pre-pandemic was that I would go to these people. And I remember my first subject was in Portland, and Dylan, who has terminal ALS, he actually is probably only got about 6 months left, and we've become very close friends over the last 3 years. I was nervous as hell to do this. I remember thinking, how am I with a film crew going to sit in a chair? Even I was worried about how am I going to sit in a chair for 6 hours, and I limited the day. So I was trying to kind of manage, like, well, we're not going to do a 14-hour day. We're going to do a 6-hour day. I had all my snacks.
Yeah. Snacks. Yeah.
I had Dave on speed dial if something happened. But I was a wreck. I remember it took me weeks to recover after that interview. I remember never, like I said, I never felt nervous before. I was also a dancer. I'd jump up on stage, I'd do stuff. I was so nervous for this day, like panic attack nervous, you know? I'm like, what is going on? Like, why can't I'm going to go talk with this person. It was a human being. I know my crew. So anyway, that led me to, really that first 2 days of interviews made me realize, like, I have to have help. I need to really modify the schedules. And then the pandemic happened, and it was the best thing in the world for me, because suddenly I didn't have to leave my home.
Yes. I felt that too, that relief. Joy,
Yeah.
I know you said you did too, because everyone was suddenly like living how we did, not leaving the house. And
Yep.
yeah.
No fear. I could
Yeah.
take naps. I could have an interview, and then I could lay down. I could schedule it so that I would have a whole week off. I mean, it was such a completely different experience when the pandemic happened. And then, so that's when, Dr. Bay entered the picture. I started taking Effexor. Immediately, within 3 days, I was like, oh, I feel more resilient. It's a little bit like how eventually the thyroid medication made me feel, but even, the next level, like, even if I'm triggered, I'm going to recover more quickly.
Right.
Or if I'm having a bad day, I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to wake up and be reset the next day. I describe it like, I feel like I have a Nerf ball around my head now. Like this little protection thing.
Yeah.
I'm only on the very lowest dose. And I love it. I never thought I would say I love a drug, but I love the drug.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful when you find that right combination, and it may take a few tries, but once you find it, it's life-changing.
Yes, it really is. And it's what I was saying earlier, where I needed that pharmaceutical intervention in my brain. So here's something that I know this wasn't on your question, but this came up with my recent interview with Yanis, who's French, has MDDS, and he's working with researchers in France around MDDS and other vestibular disorders, but mostly central. And she's finding this really high correlation between MDDS and OCD. And I thought he WhatsApped me and he said, "Do you have OCD?" And I was like, well, now that you say it, I had some weird tics as a kid. I definitely had this looping thinking where I couldn't stop it when I wanted to. And then coincidentally, literally that same day, I was on a job for a Purple mattress company. I don't know if you heard of Purple.
Oh, yeah.
And I was sitting there with the makeup artist, and she started talking about her OCD. And she's like, it's not, I'm afraid of the doorknob kind of OCD, like touching firms and stuff. She said, it's this looping thinking that you can't get yourself out of, and it will create this pattern in you that creates a lot of anxiety, just because you can't escape that thought. And I was just like, this is really interesting, because I do think I had that much more so pre-MDDS. So
Yeah, I think I had that too. Like
really
definitely
interesting.
during part, like I think in college, and then yeah, kind of when I first got married early on, I was really particular about things. And, we've talked about like type A personality, like just perfectionist, I kind of turned into that. So yeah, not like crazy, same thing, like you said, not like afraid to touch things or whatever, but yeah, it is kind of that looping way of thinking, you said a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
so she told me this really, so one of the therapies for like tried and true therapies for OCD is called exposure ritual prevention, ERP, which is essentially like you expose yourself to the thing that you're most afraid of.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, okay, this is weird, but I actually think that being forced to feel dizzy and uncomfortable for a really long period of time in some way healed that in me, because it was
Yeah.
constant exposure
Oh
to the
yeah.
thing that I was the most afraid of. And
Yeah.
eventually, exposure ritual prevention, your brain goes, oh, for good riddance. I can't keep being afraid of this because it's not going away. And your brain kind of is exhausted and it goes, oh, screw it.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's kind of like, I'm still dizzy now. I know it's not as dizzy as I was 8 years ago, but I also have really bad days, but it doesn't affect me the way it
Hmm.
used to. And I think it was a little bit like this weird, OCD intervention that my body created to go, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting.
Isn't that
Yeah, because I
interesting?
mean, when you go through something like this, you're not the same. And like the laundry, I have a huge pile out there right now that used to drive me nuts. Now it's like, I'll get to it when I get to it, like, because like it's enough to some days take a shower and be grateful for that. So yeah, I mean, that's so interesting.
And
that's
to
very
feel
interesting.
okay with discomfort. I think as a kid, I was really scared to be uncomfortable in my body, or
Mm.
to feel anything other than, like just normal would
Yeah.
scare me. Physical sensations or pain or all of that. And so then to have something that you're feeling 24/7 that initially scares the living daylights out of you,
Yes.
eventually you're like, oh, okay, I'm kind of uncomfortable a lot in my body. I'm like right now, the room is moving. Am I having a panic attack about it? No, like it's just, I'm used to being a bit uncomfortable because we can't, control those scary things that happen. And so there's some level of resilience that I definitely feel in myself now that I never felt before.
Hmm.
Being a
Yeah.
perfectionist, it's like you want to feel good all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't want to let anyone down. That was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Mhm. Oh
You
man.
know?
You
Yeah.
want
Because
to
with
feel
this,
good.
you let
Yeah.
people down.
So you
Mhm.
can work, it's hard to work when you don't feel good.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I feel really grateful that the work that I'm doing now is with people that understand. I mean,
Yes.
if someone needs to cancel or reschedule, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the queen of rescheduling. So don't worry.
Yeah. We all get it,
I get it. No big deal. And I am also, my husband he believes in this work so much. And so he's upstairs, bringing in bacon. And it's
Yeah.
Unfixed is certainly not like something that's making a bunch of money, but it is deeply fulfilling. And I'm able to do it that in a way that works with the dizziness.
Hmm.
I'm so grateful for this work and to be able to meet people like you. I I mean, the friendships, even though 99% of you I haven't met in person, I have such a deep, you've taken up real estate in my heart in a way that some of my very long friendships haven't. And it's very unusual to feel such deep connections digitally.
Yes.
I wouldn't think I'm such a like rural homesteader type of person. You wouldn't think like all of that would be fulfilling to me, but it really
It
is.
is. Yeah.
You have a community. How has Unfixed Media changed your life?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like I feel so driven and joyfully driven by this work, like endless amount of energy to continue the work. It's boundless. And in fact, I was just listening to a podcast the other day. I think it was On Being, and she was talking to an author about the importance of awe in our lives, that sense of awe and wonder. And actually, the scientist who's a Harvard psychiatrist wrote a book about it's not just like, oh yeah, awe feels good, but he's done some MRIs and blood scans to try to understand what that actually floods in our bodies. And it is essential part of feeling good in life. And he said that and we typically think of awe as like, oh, the beautiful tree or, the sunset. But he said most of that flooding of all the good neurochemicals and everything in our bodies come when we are communicating with or listening to another human being who is overcoming odds or enduring something that seems insurmountable or kind of just achieving, not necessarily in that like Hollywood arc of like, oh, I climbed the mountain and but just that sense of awe when you hear somebody that had everything ripped away and then they're building themselves back up again. I'm like, I do that every day now. No wonder I feel so good all the time.
Yes, I think that's what Joy and I, have enjoyed so much about doing this too. I mean, we feel so passionate about it.
Yeah, we just talked.
You guys, I'll tell you, So Yan, she goes by
Yes, from our group.
Yeah, she loves you guys. We just chatted last night because I did a series on long COVID and MECFS. She has MECFS, but then recently she's been experiencing some vestibular stuff. So she reached out to me and we had a really nice long chat, but she said the group that you guys have has been so helpful. And I was like, it's amazing, that this is just coming from
it, when we first started it, the group, of course, there was only like a couple people and then they just started coming and we've been lucky. I mean, we do have a very nice group and they're very supportive of each other. And it was great to meet Soyeon.
Yeah.
That's so
and
cool.
to meet people who go through what you go through, and we just have an understanding of one another.
I feel like I have so many sisters and
Yes.
brothers. We really, really, really do understand each other. And I even want to, it's not even just the understanding of the process of the vestibular disorder, which is huge to understand that, but I feel like going back to some of the type A OCD, I think we also understand the pre-vestibular disorder selves, because for whatever reason, we all have a really similar, at least from what I've seen, predisposition. And not all bad, like really kind, connected to others, maybe people pleasers, high strong work ethic. I mean, you guys are delightful to work with, I'll tell you that. Like, have a project to work with VeDA. I always know that everyone's gonna like answer my emails, follow through. It's not the case at all with the other projects I've done. at
Oh,
all.
okay.
It's kind of bizarre, actually, how like
Yeah.
you guys are vestibular patients, you follow through, you're conscientious, you're detail oriented.
So yeah, how do you come up with all those, the different ones, like the MS and I know VeDA is the life rebalance, but
You
yeah,
know,
you keep going on with it and it's wonderful.
it's kind of like you said, Joy. It's just sort of, they just happen organically. I mean, there's definitely some pitching, like the long COVID project. I had an intern for a while that said, hey, would it be interesting to do a project on long COVID? And I was like, yeah, okay. And so I researched and found an organization, and they surprisingly had a budget, and they replied and said, okay, let's do it. So sometimes it takes me just kind of putting myself out there. But often, like MS Confidential was Elizabeth, it was her brainchild. She's was in the original Unfixed series, and she said, I always wanted to do this, and I can't say no. In a perfect world, I wish I had like 10 people that were part of Unfixed, that so I didn't have to say no to anything, because I do have, like, I have sticky notes all over my desk right now of projects that I want to do, and people that email and say, hey, have you thought about doing a project on death and dying, or these different, but they all just come from people like you that say, have you thought about this? So I think it just keeps snowballing.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
and I am still really kind of doing it myself, other than the branding. With my husband does all the beautiful branding and stuff, and then I have an editor now. So
Yes, that's awesome.
that's why I've been able to say yes to these 2 projects this year and do Life Rebalanced and the mental health series, because he's editing all of it, and I'll pay him 80% of the budget so that I can keep him happy.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wow.
eventually maybe I'll have some income myself, but at this point it's like, I want the help, I need the help. And I never want people to work for free. I want to pay them what they deserve. And so creating really quality content is the most important thing to me, that changes people's lives. So I'm genuinely like blown away by everybody. That makes sense. And to a fault, like my husband will be like, take it down a notch, like fast forward 6 months and you might not be feeling this way. But I'm the person that's, everybody starts at 100%, but most of the time they stay there, because I'm just like, wow, can you believe that this happened? And maybe it's just, I don't know, there's just something in me that is just really genuinely thrilled by what human beings share and what they go through. I grew up in
and
a
it comes out, we sense that. Yeah.
I think I think I'm that way about like, I'm genuinely thrilled that my cats, want to jump in a box of toilet paper every day, like I'm thrilled by this thing. I think I'm easily delighted.
No, it's wonderful though, how you just make everyone feel so comfortable.
Oh, thank you. I saw on your question, one of your questions was what did I learn from like the film industry?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is, to me, even before all of this, the number one thing. You lead with kindness, and you lead with just absolute humility and gratitude for this being in front of you. Whether it's, your director of photography or your editor, or I just feel like there's no reason to be any other way than to just be deeply appreciative. And sure, there's conflicts that happen and all that. And I'm the first to say I'm totally conflict averse, and I would much rather just like, let's just get past it. But I don't hold on to things much. And I do really feel like just leading with a generous heart and kindness is the way to go to get anything done. Yeah, there are so many different walks in this world. I'm glad too that the work that I started by accident, since I guess this is occurring to me now, But had I already had a vestibular diagnosis, had it come earlier, I probably wouldn't have started Unfixed with all these different chronic illnesses.
Mhm.
And maybe one of the positives of taking so long to get a diagnosis is that I reached into the broader chronic illness community. And man, first of all, we all share experiences. Like we are all so similar in so many ways. But also these unique journeys in our bodies that are, like my friend Dylan that I was telling you about that has ALS. What other walk of life would I have ever been able to connect with this human being who's lost everything? He can't even use his voice anymore. But I was there a couple months ago giving him a foot rub, and I'm like holding his feet, and there is so much life force in him, you know, and I feel so grateful to be able to just have that experience with this gorgeous young man who's had this horrible diagnosis, and to not be afraid of it and not be in a hospital setting with him, just have this kind friendship exchange. Never would have had that experience ever in my life, you know.
No. Has doing the Unfixed series, how has that helped you in your symptoms?
Has
it helped any?
You know, I think mostly it's just probably calmed my nervous system down, in the sense that knowing that I'm not alone. I think it's more of a global, so much of, I think us would have the central vestibular disorder. It's as even Emma was saying yesterday, who's also in Life Rebalance, it's the nervous system that needs to heal. And so knowing that I'm not alone, knowing that I can, even in those moments, I can close my eyes and feel all of you out there, and feel all of these, the Unfixed work it's about the people, and knowing all those people are out there now, and not just knowing that they're out there, but feeling their resilience and their strength and their wisdom, and like, whoa, these humans are awesome people. That makes my nervous system heal.
Yeah, I feel that way too with what Joy and I do.
I'm sure you guys do. And you get this real immediate contact with them through your support group too. Imagine, you're getting people coming to you asking questions and saying, in really probably desperate moments, saying, how do I do this?
Yes.
Really powerful.
The ICU, is that where you came up with the name for ICU podcast that you've recently is that, tell us about the podcast.
Yeah, it started as originally I've been working with a colleague down in Australia who's a doctor, and he wrote a book called The Art of Doctoring, and I don't remember how we connected, I think through his podcast, and we did some work on a curriculum for a medical school together, and just have developed a rapport. He sends me his students for like projects, and then I will occasionally come to him and say, hey, let's try this. And the idea originally was to do ICU as a panel discussion once a month with different disorders. So I said, well, let's start with VeDA. And then next month we'll do Solve and ME, and it went so well. Laura from Australia, she mediated it, and we had 3 medical students from Melbourne, and Emma, two other people from the UK. Anyway, so time zone was over there, and they moderated the most fabulous conversation with these medical students that were so genuinely interested in learning about vestibular disorders. And I was like, this is just awesome. So I talked to Cynthia, and Cynthia actually came to me and said, let's do a podcast. And we didn't originally think to do the ICU thing. We were just trying to come up with ideas. We were going to do she wanted to do sort of like Sherlock Holmes mystery type of thing where we were trying to like investigate. And I was like, I'm not really a mystery girl. I wanted to do something about like cats. No, I don't think the board will go for that. We're like, this thing worked that we already did with Moyas in Australia. So let's try to spin off of that. And that went down. So it was, I think the board has been wanting her to do a podcast for a really long time. And she could do it on her own. She's great. But I think she wanted to just have a little padding. She wanted a friend to help. Yeah. Like I said, I always say yes to things. So I'm like, sure. And it's actually wonderful. They're producing it. And so it's not a huge time commitment on my part. And it's a nice way to connect with more of the physician population or the physicians in training population. So it feels like it's doing good.
Yeah, no, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we have some fun questions
Yes.
we can get to. So the first one, maybe you kind of talked on, but what are some of your hobbies and what do you do for relaxation?
Okay. For one, well, especially in the winter, but I mean, I'm obsessed with my cats. Nova and Otis are brother and sister. We got them 4 years ago, and I think I'm training them to be like in the cat Olympics someday because it's my fault, but now they expect it from me. But there is serious training going on every morning and evening, and I draw as much joy from it as they do, and I create these toys that really get them excited. And I sit on the floor and they chase and chase and chase until they're just out of breath. One of them plays fetch, so she actually catches and brings it back, and then the other one is more of a string chaser. And my husband just watches. He doesn't participate in it at all, but he's amused by how amused I am.
Yeah.
And I mean, I start my day just laughing every day. I'm thrilled by it. So I don't know if you call that a hobby, but it thrills me.
Yeah.
Play with my little buddies. And in the summer months, I leash train them so that we go out for a walk in the morning. And we live really rural, so there's coyotes and stuff, so they couldn't be off of a leash, so we go for little nature walks.
Do they like it?
They love it. And then in the summer months, spring, summer, fall, we grow a lot of our own food, and so gardening and yard and harvesting and homesteading, taking care of our chickens, all of that is a huge part of my life. And it's a huge part of my therapy, again, because it pulls me away from the screen. So
yes,
I'm digging holes and fixing the coop and planting things. And this is my latest little hobby. Last year I had a bag of calendula seeds, and I planted them, and I had no idea how well those grew in our climate. And I ended up having, I want to say, probably 20 harvests. Every time you clip them, they would just come back. And I was just drying them in the garage, and I Googled how to I was like, I'll create some oil because I know calendula is really good for your skin.
Yeah.
So I infused it in jojoba oil, and then I had a bunch of that. So I thought, I'm going to make some face lotion. So I ended up getting some shea butter and rose water and creating this beautiful face cream. And I have still about 20 of them in the fridge, and I've been handing them out to friends in town or on jobs and stuff. And now I'm going to create a line, 3 products. There's going to be a hyaluronic acid and a face cream. And it's all calendula based. Dave got me a dehydrator for Christmas, so I can actually properly dehydrate them. They're so good.
That's so exciting. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna buy one for sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
awesome.
amazing.
I'll send you.
I love beauty things and skincare and I've used oils with calendula, so I'm
Oh,
very excited
amazing.
about this.
Yeah, the label right now is Birdhouse because we were using it for our jams and other Christmas presents and stuff. But Dave's going to brand it and we're going to call it Fluff. And there's going to be a Fluff face moisturizer, a Fluff hyaluronic acid, and then a Fluff body bar. I'm going to give it to sort of like the makeup artists and modeling industry people in this town, and have this really nice poppy kind of label. So the label you'll have isn't the original, the label we'll have in the future. But it's fun. It's so fun.
No, I'm so excited. I'll definitely buy your line though. See, look at you doing all these projects. It's amazing.
Yeah, I am a little hyperactive. I have a lot of energy, but I feel good after all these years of feeling so bad.
Yeah.
I feel maybe some of it is just like, I'm just so happy to be alive and to be able to do all of these things again. And on the days that I can't, I think there's something too about living rural. There's so few distractions out here. It really takes a while for a friend to come visit, so I have a lot of time, that would normally, when I was living in town, would be spent just like walking down the neighborhood or, just going to yoga classes, or everything out here is like you go hiking in the woods for exercise, and there's more time in rural.
I love that.
How did you get into the film career?
I got into the industry when I was in medical school. I was in naturopathic school in my 20s. And when I left, after 2.5 years, dropped out, I ended up like, what am I going to do with my life? And I got involved in modeling in Portland. And it was like something that just needed money. I needed to pay off my student loans. I was like, this is a way you can make money. And I was already 30 at the time, so it wasn't like high fashion modeling. It was like sports modeling and catalog modeling for like Midwestern catalogs, nothing fancy, like no high fashion thing. And it was a really fun group of people, like no ego. Actually, I felt less ego in this Portland fashion industry than I did like even in the medical school stuff. It was just like people, we all knew that, like doing Sunday ads for grocery stores, things like in the newspaper, but it made good money. And anyway, so I was on that side of the camera, but because I'm a curious person, I just wanted to start learning about the other side of the camera. And I learned, as the industry is, a lot of young newbies coming into the industry wanted to learn how to model or wanted to get in the industry. And so I took them under my wing, and I would do their first like tests, they call them, which is like a bunch of 4 different looks. And we'd take them out to an island. And one of my good friends was a makeup artist. And I would just, as like I do with the Unfixed stuff, is more coaching them on feeling good inside. And it wasn't about all the trappings of the fashion industry. And so I was enjoying photographing them. But I wanted more after that. And I started doing some photography campaigns and things like that, but I just felt more like the storytelling was where it was at. And so the technology was changing so fast. So it was really easy to just flip your camera and go, I'm going to do a video now. And so that's when I had an idea to just do a short film as a trial. And I ended up doing a Kickstarter to raise the money for this very short script that I wrote. And we shot it in Palm Springs. I had a small crew of 8 people, and we flew down to Palm Springs for 3 days. And we shot this crazy story about a CPR mannequin and a sort of mid-century house and a 50s housewife who was sort of trying to escape the predicament that she was in. And it was so much fun. And I thought, okay, and that was one of those where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just raised this money and I've got this amazing crew of people. And through the modeling world, I had met a lot of different industry people. So I felt humbled that they were willing to come down with me and share this experience. So that's why, humility and kindness led the way. And I was like, thank you guys for doing this and believing in me. And I think that's really how it started. And most of those people were in the commercial industry and stuff. So it's not like there wasn't really mentoring as much as just like, let's just go have fun together and see what we can create. And it's kept going from there. I realized I love this and I love storytelling. I love, it was an all narrative at the time. It wasn't about documentary. It was about I was very much interested in the conditioning of women, so how do we break free of the conditioning that we were born into? And so the second film that I did was all about the conditioning of this ballerina and this deep secret that was part of her upbringing in her studio. And so I was kind of the psychological narratives around like trying to find freedom within the paradigm that we live in. So in a way, now living with all of this dizziness, it's still trying to, find freedom within the predicament that we wake up in every day.
Has there been something working in this field of either film or within the vestibular world that you didn't expect? Something that surprised you?
Something that surprised me. Well, oh my gosh. I mean, the first thing, like I said earlier, there was a lot less ego. If I were from a Midwestern girl, Wisconsin, thinking like, oh, film industry, I would think, oh, there's so much ego. And granted, I'm in Portland, I'm not in Hollywood, but there's not a lot of ego in it. It's a lot of hard workers, a lot of people that just want to do good in the world. Even if it's a narrative story or a nonfiction story, it doesn't matter. It's just people that love the process of creativity and want to participate in that in their lives. So there's this sweetness that I never thought I would have expected. From my experience, I'm sure there's plenty of filmmakers who would say,
What is the most maybe humbling lesson you've learned in your career?
Oh, the most humbling is that I can't control anything. I am completely, as a former recovering perfectionist, I am ultimately a mess. I am not going to be able to control everything. And things are going to hurt. And I might completely fall down on my knees and not be able to get myself up sometimes. And just when things are going well, something might come along and throw me off track. That is definitely, and that, it is really scary to feel like you can't tell your body what to do. When we're in that experience early on, I remember just being like, this is my body and I can't get it to do what I want it to do. Like that is just so scary. And you can't even, all my techniques from meditation and yoga, nothing, nothing. All I had was to surrender to it.
That's
Yeah.
so true, though. All of us feel that way. You know, all you can do when you have no control is to surrender to it. Like,
That's what these guys, for me, this was the surrender moment.
I love that.
Well, so what really happened, and I thought I was having sort of like a psychotic break, because I felt like the only way I could deal with the sensations I was having was to start to feel something outside of my body. I couldn't go in, like I remember a yoga teacher was like, just go within. And I'm like, no, the worst place in the world for me right now. But I felt like if I could like visualize another part of myself out in the universe, like way out in like Jupiter, and visualize the part of me that was in so much pain and suffering, and just have them both hold each other. That to me helped. That to me was just allowing the person that was feeling the dizziness and so scared to just be that. And then the part of me that was way out here that was aware of that, to just hold it. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but it really, really allowed this surrender to just deepen, and to have compassion for the experience. It allowed me just to go, oh man, I'm so sorry you're suffering so much. Like two personalities happening, inside of my head.
Yeah.
Tell us more about your sustainable homestead that you have.
Yeah. You said you have
I want to
chickens
know.
and
Yeah,
yeah, that's so cool.
again, accidental, and probably be because of the dizziness. Like I said, my husband and I left the city, didn't have plans to be homesteaders or anything. But we moved to the coast. We lived there for a year. We knew that we needed, and even during that time, we were sort of on the rocks. And like, are we going to continue our relationship? I was still really dizzy. We started looking for a home. We got a realtor, and kind of thought maybe we'll build, but maybe I'll move to Wisconsin. I was actually applying for graduate school in Wisconsin. Like, I just maybe need a fresh start, lots of different things on the plate. This house came up in the middle of nowhere. It's an old 1,200 square foot schoolhouse. So like a one-room schoolhouse from the 1930s. That's what this house is. And then it was sort of remodeled into more of an open floor plan, tiny little house with chickens. It came with chickens, and it came with koi, and it came with a huge fruit orchard, like grapes, kiwis, figs, cherries, apples, plums, literally all of that. And we thought, let's do it. And it felt right. And both he and I grew up very rural, and it was the right price, and it felt like home as soon as we put our feet on the ground. But I had a lot of like, okay, I got to figure out how to take care of all this stuff.
Yeah.
I had chickens before, never grew fruit or anything. And actually, my first film project was here at this house, because back when the dizziness had just started, I had met somebody who had reached out and said, I would like to hire you to make a film series on my business. And his business was called Edible Gardens, which is basically helping people in the Portland area grow their own backyard gardens. And I remember sitting with him at a coffee shop, and the table was bouncing up and down, and I'm like, heart's racing, and I'm like, and I literally told him, I want to do this, but I don't know what's wrong with me. And I feel like I need to just get back to you, because I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I had his email, never followed up. Things spiraled into like, hell and high back. And then when we bought this place, I went back through my emails, and I was like, I wonder if Ian is still around, because maybe he would still like series, but we'll do trade. and he'll build garden beds on our property and teach me how to take care of everything. So we did a film project over a period of a year, and it was the first time I picked up my camera in 6 years. And all the filming happened right outside. So it was all under my control.
Yeah.
He would come out here, and he wasn't just planting, but he mentored, and he wrote like this whole guide of when to plant and when to rotate. And so it was amazing. And I created a 12-part mini series for him on how to grow vegetables in your backyard. It was, very small, but it was a little way of me starting to say yes again to creating. And so, now we plant every spring, and there's lots of mistakes, and we still are figuring it out, but I love it. We have four hens out there, and they're adorable. They love them, and they lay eggs like almost throughout the whole year. So
Wow, that's so cool.
and I spoil them. I make them like it's good for them to eat eggs. So I scramble some of their eggs like once a week with oatmeal and garlic and seaweed, and I totally spoil them.
Well, Kimberly, thank you for being here with us today. We've learned so much about you, Unfixed Media. We can't wait to see what you do in the future. So just thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Kimberly.
Oh, it's been
an honor.
I've loved connecting with you. And if you ever want to do a part 2, it's just so dear to connect with you guys. Maybe we can connect in person someday.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, we can't wait. And we will also, for the viewers, we're going to link, all of the Unfixed Media, the socials, so they will be in the description of this video. So thank you everyone for watching, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.